Hi, let's do some Book of the Month predictions. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. If you're new here, I talk about books and writing. In the description, I always put links to my newsletter and some of the books I've written. And if you find that you like this video, subscribe and hang out. I do about one Book of the Month video a month. If you're not new here, I have 2 kids homesick, which is pretty normal. They are being quiet and good. Hopefully you won't hear them yelling in the background. To begin this video, which is mostly about the predictions for March, what Book of the Month is gonna pick, I thought I'd start by telling you that they came out with their Books of the Year nomination. So a couple weeks, maybe a month ago, they had us all vote on what our favorite book of the year was. And you can't pick out of all of them. They give you specific choices. And I believe I voted for The Invisible Hour by Alice Hoffman because I think it was nominated and that was my favorite book I read this past year. So now the top 5 are None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, which I read and really enjoyed. Shark Heart by Emily Haddock, which I haven't read, but I have on my TBR shelf, or rather like my to-buy shelf that Book of the Month has. Wayward by Amelia Hart, which I read and I loved. The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer, which I have on my to-be-bought shelf from Book of the Month. And Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. So one of those is going to win Book of the Year. Also, the cool thing about being a member is I'm going to get one of those for free in my next box. I am leaning towards Shark Heart. Let's go ahead and get started with what I think the picks might be for historical fiction. I, as always, have my computer right here because I cannot remember this many plot lines. I'm just not that good at memorization. So the first one is The Divorcees by Rowan Beard. It is coming out on March 19th, so it's a March release. It has 241 ratings on Goodreads right now with a 3.53 average, and it is published by Flatiron Books, which is one of the publishing companies Book of the Month really likes to use. It's 272 pages, so it's a normal length. I'm going to give you a bit of a blurb. Lois Saunders thought marrying the right man would cure her loneliness, but as picture perfect as her husband is, she is suffocating in their loveless marriage. In 1951, though, unhappiness is hardly grounds for divorce, except in Reno, Nevada. At the Golden Yarrow, the most respectable of Reno's famous divorce ranches, Lois finds herself with half a dozen other would-be divorcees, all in Reno for the 6 weeks residency that is the state's only divorce requirement. They spend their days riding horses and their nights flirting with cowboys, and it's as wild and fun as Lake Forest, Illinois is prim and stifling. But it isn't until Greer Lang arrives that the Lois's world truly cracks open. Gorgeous, beguiling, and completely indifferent to societal convention, Greer is unlike anyone Lois has ever met, and she sees something in Lois that no one ever has. Under her influence, Lois begins to push against the limits that have always restrained her, but how much can she really trust her mysterious new friend, and how far will she go to forge her independence on her own terms? I really like historical fictions that are kind of different, and this felt different. The 1950s is not like unexplored, but I feel like it's kind of overshadowed by the 1940s in terms of historical fiction. I also think that looking at marital relations in the 50s is extremely interesting because I feel like it was such a different time period than it is now in terms of like divorce in particular. I never knew that Reno had this law, which sounds like something very cool to read about. Next for historical fiction, I have The Great Divide by Christina Enriquez, I think is how you say her last name. It is coming out on March 5th. It is 336 pages, currently has 211 ratings on Goodreads with a 4.09 average. Part of the reason I picked this book is for my husband because it is about something he is obsessed with. It is said that the Panama Canal will be the greatest feat of engineering in history, but first it must be built. For Francisco, a local fisherman who resents the foreign powers clamoring for a slice of his country, nothing is more upsetting than a decision of his son Omar to work as a digger in the excavation zone. But for Omar, whose upbringing was quiet and lonely, this job offers a chance to finally find connection. Ada Bunting is a bold 16-year-old from Barbados who arrives in Panama as a stowaway alongside thousands of other West Indians seeking work. Alone and with no resources, she is determined to find a job that will earn enough money for her ailing sister's surgery. When she sees the young man, Omar, who has collapsed after a grueling shift, she is the only one who rushes to his aid. John Oswald has dedicated his life to scientific research in his journey to Panama in single-minded pursuit of one goal, eliminating malaria. But now his wife Marion has fallen ill herself, and when he witnesses Ada's bravery and compassion, he hires her on the spot as a caregiver. This fateful decision sets in motion a sweeping tale of ambition, loyalty, and sacrifice. My husband's obsessed with the Panama Canal. Like, I would say my husband never thinks about the Roman Empire, but he thinks about the Panama Canal all the time. We really wanted to try to go to the Panama Canal before we had kids, and it didn't work out. So we will be those people, you know, who are like in their 60s at the Panama Canal. But I thought that sounded like a cool book. You know, I think the Panama Canal is very interesting. This would be a cool slice of history. And lastly, for historical fiction, I have Anita de Monte Laughs Last. The author is I don't know how to say her name, Gonzalez. The cover's right here. You can see her. She is a repeat author. She wrote Olga Dies Dreaming, which was a book of the month pick. This one's coming out on March 5th. It has 257 ratings on Goodreads with a 4.47 average, which is quite high. It also is out by Flatiron, which Book of the Month loves Flatiron. This is one of those historical fictions that makes me feel a little bad about herself because it starts 1985, which is after I was born. Anita de Monte, a rising star in the art world, is found dead in New York City. Her tragic death is the talk of the town until it isn't. By 1998, I was in high school, Anita's name has been all but forgotten, certainly by the time Raquel, a third-year art history student, is preparing her final thesis. On College Hill, surrounded by privileged students whose futures are already paved out for them, Raquel feels like an outsider. Students of color like her are the minority there, and the pressure to work twice as hard for the same opportunities is no secret. But when Raquel becomes romantically involved with a well-connected older art student, she finds herself unexpectedly rising up the social ranks. As she attempts to straddle both worlds, she stumbles upon Anita's story, raising questions about the dynamics of her own relationship, which eerily mirrors the forgotten artist. Moving back and forth through time and told from the perspectives of both women, Anita de Monte Laughs Last is a propulsive, witty examination of power, love, and art. That feels very much like a Book of the Month pick. Also, the fact that the author has been chosen before, and I think that book did pretty well at Book of the Month. I did not buy it, but I think a lot of people did buy it. So that's why I feel like if it's not going to be a pick, it's probably going to be an add-on. Okay, let's move on to romance. First, I'm going to blow my nose. Okay, on to romance. The first romance is a historical romance. It's called The Love Remedy by Elizabeth Everett. It is coming out on March 19th. And it currently has 57 ratings and a 4.14 average on Goodreads. When a Victorian apothecary hires a stoic private investigator to protect her business, they learn there's only one way to treat true love, with a happily ever after. When Lucinda Peterson's recently perfected formula for a salve to treat croup goes missing, she's certain it's only the latest in a line of misfortunes at the high ends of a rival apothecary. Outraged and fearing financial ruin, Lucy turns to a private investigator, Jonathan Thorne, for help. She just didn't expect her champion to be so grumpy. A single father and an agent at Tierney & Company, Thorne accepts missions for a wide variety of employers, from the British government to wronged wives. None have intrigued him so much as the spirited Miss Peterson. As the two work side by side to unmask her scientific saboteur, Lucy slips ever so sweetly under Thorne's battered armor, tempting him to abandon old promises. With no shortage of suspects, from a hostile political group to an erstwhile suitor, Thorne's investigation becomes a threat to all Lucy holds dear. As the truth unravels around them, the cure to their problems is they must face the future together. So this sounded fun. So we have some fun tropes here. We've got the grumpy sunshine trope. We have the kind of one working for the other trope. We've got a single father in historical, which sounds kind of fun. I'm currently obsessed with Miss Scarlet and the Duke. I just finished season 4, and this gave me some Miss Scarlet and the Duke vibes, which I like. Next for romance, I have In a Not So Perfect World by Neely Tubati Alexander. It is 352 pages. It comes out March 19th. It currently has 74 ratings on Goodreads with a 4.24 average. And here's your blurb. Sloane Cooper is up for her dream job as a designer for a top video game company. During the interview, though, she somehow promises the all-male panel that she'll remain single and fully dedicated to her work. It's actually fine. After her last boyfriend cheated on her, she vowed to focus on her career anyway. Enter Charlie, aka a hot neighbor guy, a near stranger who shocks her with an offer of an all-inclusive trip to Turks and Caicos resort. The catch? Charlie originally planned the trip with his ex and asks Sloane to pose as his new girlfriend to make his old flame come running back. Against her better judgment, Sloane says yes, she can use the time away to develop a game design that will dazzle the catapult team and get her a job offer. Despite sparks flying in paradise, the trip can't lead to more. As their connection deepens, Sloane is reminded that she can't fall for Charlie and get knocked off her professional path. Besides, he's trying to win back his true love. Can Sloane figure out a way to move past heartbreak, land the job of her dreams, and avoid catching feelings? The zombie apocalypse would be easier to solve. At least she's prepared for that. So this has a lot of tropes in it. This has been an interesting, I don't know if pattern is the right word, but there have been a lot of contemporary romances that have been taking sort of historical romance tropes. So this feels very much like one of them. So you've got a fake dating relationship, which, I mean, I don't know about you. I've never found myself in a fake dating relationship in the modern world, but maybe you have? But also the whole, like, she has this job, so she can't date. Reminds me of in The Last Kingdom when Athelflaed, was that her name? Has to break up with Uhtred because she's going to be like Queen of Mercia, and she promises she won't ever marry or be with anyone because she doesn't want to have an heir. And that feels a little bit historical to me. But it also felt like a fun rom-com with a fun cover, and it's like going to be very beachy. Next, we have Expiration Dates by Rebecca Searle, which she is a twice before Book of the Month author, I believe twice, at least once, but I think 2 times. The book's coming out on March 5th. It's 272 pages, and it currently has 1,991 ratings on Goodreads with a 3.88 average. This is down as a romance, but it also has magical realism as one of its tags, and it also has chick lit as one of its tags. So I'm putting it in romance because it's the first one that Goodreads lists, but I wouldn't be super surprised if this was a pick and under a different genre. Being single is like playing the lottery. There's always the chance that with one piece of paper, you could win it all. Daphne Bell believes the universe has a plan for her. Every time she meets a new man, she receives a slip of paper with his name and number on it, the exact amount of time they will be together. The papers told her she'd spend 3 days with Martin in Paris, 5 weeks with Noah in San Francisco, and 3 months with Hugo, her ex-boyfriend turned best friend. Daphne has been receiving numbered papers for over 20 years, always wondering when there might be one without an expiration. Finally, the night of a blind date at her favorite Los Angeles restaurant, there's only a Jake. But as Jake and Daphne's story unfolds, Daphne finds herself doubting the paper's predictions and wrestling with what it means to be both committed and truthful, because Daphne knows things Jake doesn't, information that, if he found out, would break his heart. This feels very interesting. This also feels, I don't know if this is a romance or not. Is it romantic or is it actually a romance? I don't want to read the reviews and get a spoiler, so I'm not going to, nor am I going to guess what's going to happen. But that feels like it could be a romance pick, but it also feels like it could maybe be a contemporary fiction pick or even a magical realism pick. We'll see. And then lastly, I have This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. It's book 2 in the Skyland series, and the first book in that series, which is called Before I Let Go. The first book in that series, which is called Before I Let Go, was an add-on for Book of the Month. So I do think This Could Be Us is going to be an add-on. I had it down for February, so if you go back to my February Book of the Month predictions, I have a long intro about that. So you can go watch it. I'll link it below. Okay, on to thriller and mystery. The first being The Princess of Las Vegas by Chris Bojalian. I don't know. I've literally been trying to pronounce that author's name since 2003 when I started working at an indie bookstore. I don't know how to say it. I'm sure someone has said it to me and I just can't remember. It comes out on March 26th. It's 400 pages. It currently has 156 ratings on Goodreads with a 3.96 average. Let's jump in. Chrissy Dowling has created a world that suits her perfectly. She passes her days by the pool in a private cabana. She splurges on ice cream but never gains an ounce. And each evening she transforms into a princess, performing her musical cabaret inspired by the life of the late Diana Spencer. Some might find her strange or even delusional, an American speaking with a British accent, hair feathered into a style 30 years old, living and working in a casino that has become a dated trash heap. On top of that, Chrissy's daily diet of Adderall and Valium leaves her a little more than tipsy. Her son and her boyfriend has gone back to his wife, and her entire career rests on resembling a dead woman. And yet, fans see her for the gifted chameleon she is, showering her with gifts, letters, and standing ovations night after night. But when Chrissy's sister Betsy arrives in town with her new boyfriend and a teenage daughter, and when Richie Morley, the owner of Buckingham Palace Casino, is savagely murdered, Chrissy's carefully constructed kingdom comes crashing down all around her. So the first, in Goodreads, they have this as mystery, historical fiction, and thriller. So I went back and forth about whether or not to call it historical fiction, but it seems like it's taking place mostly in the present because it says her style is 30 years old, which that was about 30 years ago that Diana was at her height. So I thought thriller would be a better choice. So we'll see if that gets picked. That sounds kind of interesting. Next, I have How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin. This one is really... So for a mystery thriller, let's listen to these Goodreads stats. So first of all, it's coming out on March 26th. It has 368 pages. It currently has 1,121 ratings on Goodreads with a 4.01 average, which for a romance, that's not crazy. For a mystery thriller, that's a lot of reviews before the book comes out, which made me think that maybe it might be a pick because of that. Here's your blurb. It's 1965 and teenage Frances Adams is at an English country fair with her two best friends. But Frances' night takes a hairpin turn when a fortune teller makes a bone-chilling prediction. One day, Frances will be murdered. Frances spends a lifetime trying to solve a crime that hasn't happened yet, compiling dirt on every person who crosses her path in an effort to prevent her own demise. For decades, no one takes Frances seriously, until nearly 60 years later when Frances is found murdered, just like she always said she would be. In the present day, Annie Adams has been summoned to a meeting in the sprawling country estate of her wealthy and reclusive great-aunt Frances. But by the time Annie arrives in the quaint English village of Castle Knoll, Frances is already dead. Annie is determined to catch the killer, but thanks to Frances's lifelong habit of digging up secret and lies, it seems every endearing and eccentric villager might just have a motive for her murder. Can Annie safely unravel the dark mystery at the heart of Castle Knoll, or will dredging up the past throw her into the path of a killer? So that feels much more mystery and cozy than thriller, and sounds pretty fun. And it has so many reviews, which makes me think they're really pushing this. Lastly, I just threw this one on. I don't necessarily think it's going to be picked, and maybe it'll be an aardvark choice instead, because I did notice some of the books last month that I thought were going to be Book of the Month picks ended up being aardvark picks. But it's The Extinction of Irina Ray by Jennifer Croft. It comes out on March 5th. It's 320 pages. I also hemmed and hawed about what section to put this in, but I landed on thriller mystery. So just listen to it's got 64 ratings with a 4.14 average. I can't remember if I said that already. So here's your blurb. 8 translators arrive at a house in a primeval Polish forest on the border of Belarus. It belongs to the world-renowned author Irina Ray, and they are there to translate her magnum opus, Grey Eminence. But within days of their arrival, Irina disappears without a trace. The translators, who hail from 8 different countries but share the same reverence for their beloved author, begin to investigate where she may have gone while proceeding with work on her masterpiece. They explore this ancient wooded refuge with its intoxicating slime molds and lichens and study her exotic belongings and layered text for clues. But doing so reveals secrets and deceptions of Irina Ray's that they are utterly unprepared for. Forced to face their differences as they grow increasingly paranoid in this fever dream of isolation and obsession, soon the translators are tangled up in a web of rivalries and desire, threatening not only their work, but the fate of their beloved author herself. Then it says, this hilarious, thought-provoking debut novel by award-winning translator and author Jennifer Croft is a brilliant examination of art, celebrity, the natural world, and the power of language, which I did not get hilarious from this. So I don't really know what to expect from this book, but I feel like this is going to be one of those books that sort of takes the literary world by surprise. And maybe this will be under litfic instead of thriller, or I don't know. Part of me, when I first read this, I was like, is this a fantasy? So I don't know what genre it's going to be in, but I wanted to tell you about it. Okay, on to fantasy sci-fi. The first one I have is The Morningside by Tay Obrecht. I don't know. I went to high school with someone who had a very similar last name, and I can't remember how to pronounce it. It is coming out March 19th. It's 304 pages. It currently has 147 ratings on Goodreads with a 3.88 average. In terms of genre, Goodreads has it listed with fiction, fantasy, litfic, magical realism, mystery, dystopia, post-apocalyptic. So it's one of those that, then science fiction. I don't know what book of the month would classify that as, but honestly, that feels like the theme of the month. I feel like a lot of books are coming out that don't fit neatly into a particular genre, and so we're just gonna see where book of the month puts them all. After being expelled from their ancestral home, Sylvia and her mother finally settle at the Morningside, a crumbling luxury tower in Island City, where Sylvia's Aunt Anna serves as a superintendent. Sylvia feels unmoored in her new life because her mother has been so diligently secretive about their family's past. Sylvia knows almost nothing about the place where she was born and spent her early years, nor does she know why she and her mother had to leave. But in Anna, there is a person willing to give the young girl glimpses into the folktales of her demolished homeland, a place of natural beauty and communal spirit that is lacking in Sylvia's lonely and impoverished reality. Enchanted by Anna's story, Sylvia begins seeing the world with magical possibilities and becomes obsessed with the mysterious older woman who lives in the penthouse of Morningside. Bezzy Duras is an enigma to everyone in the building. She has her own elevator entrance and leaves only to go out at night and walk her 3 massive hounds. often not returning until the early morning. Sylvia's mission to unravel the truth about this woman's life and her own haunted past may end up costing her everything. That sounded very cool. It's got a very book of the month cover. I'm glad the antibiotics are working. I could do without the screaming. Next for you, I have Memory Piece by Lisa Ko. She is a previous book of the month author. Her book is coming out on March 19th. It has 304 pages. It currently only has 54 ratings on Goodreads, which is a little low, but it has a 4.24 average. This is listed as both historical fiction and science fiction. Do with that what you will. In the early 1980s, Giselle Chin, Jackie Ong, and Ellen Ng are three teenagers drawn together by their sense of shared alienation and desire for something different. Allied in the weirdest parts of themselves, they envision each other as artistic collaborators and embark on a future defined by freedom and creativity. By the time they are adults, their dreams are murkier. As a performance artist, Giselle must navigate an elite social world she never conceived of. As a coder thrilled by the internet's early egalitarian promise, Jackie must contend with its more sinister shift towards monetization and surveillance. And as a community activist, Ellen confronts the increasing gentrification and policing overwhelming her New York City neighborhood. Over time, their friendship matures and changes, their definitions of success become more complicated, and their sense of what matters evolves. So here's where you'd read that and think, why didn't you put this in historical fiction? Here's where you understand why it's in the sci-fi part. Moving from the pre-digital 1980s to the art and tech subcultures of the 1990s to a strikingly imagined portrait of the 2040s, Memory Piece is an innovative and audacious story of three lifelong friends as they strive to build satisfying lives in a world that turns out to be radically different from the one they were promised. That gave me sort of the vibe of, let's see if I can remember what it's called, Sea of Tranquility by Emily, what's her name? Emily St. John Mandel or Emily Mandel St. John? I can't remember. That book had part was in the past, part was in the present, and then you had some in the future. So that organization of the story sort of reminded me of that. So that sounded like a fun historical fiction / science fiction. Again, I don't know where they would put it. Would they just put it in lit fic? I don't know. Lastly, I don't usually do horror, but let's go ahead and have a horror section. First being Murder Road by Simone St. James, which I'm pretty positive is going to be a pick because Book of the Month loves Simone St. James. And I love Simone St. James, but I can't read horror. I can only read her thrillers, so that makes me sad. This book's coming out on March 5th. It's 352 pages. It currently has 422 ratings with a 4.17 average. July 1995, April and Eddie have taken a wrong turn. They're looking for the small resort town where they plan to spend their honeymoon. When they spot what appears to be a lone hitchhiker along the deserted road, they stop to help. But not long after the hitchhiker gets into their car, they see blood seeping from her jacket and a truck barreling down Atticus Line after them. When the hitchhiker dies at a local hospital, April and Eddie find themselves in the crosshairs of the Cold Lake Falls police. Unexplained murders have been happening along Atticus Line for years, and the cops finally have two witnesses who easily become their only suspects. As April and Eddie start to dig into the history of the town and that horrible stretch of road to clear their names, they soon learn there is something supernatural at work, something that could not only tear the town and its dark secrets apart, but take April and Eddie down with it all. That sounds good. I can't read it. Bummer, because I think that Simone St. James does such a good job of weaving paranormal stuff into her thrillers. Aren't you all so lucky, those of you who can read horror? You may have noticed I skipped contemporary / lit fic as a genre. So here's the reason. I couldn't find anything specific that screamed either of those, contemporary fic or lit fic, other than the couple I talked about, which felt like could maybe be there, like Memory Piece by Lisa Ko. I feel like that could be a lit fic. And then The Extinction of Irina Ray, I feel like that could be a lit fic. And even Expiration Dates by Rebecca Searle, that could be a contemporary fiction. So I just don't have that specific genre. I think either one of those will be listed as that genre, or there might be an early release pick that's like an April release that Book of the Month will have be the contemporary or lit fic choice for the month. Okay, so let's go with my picks. For historical fiction pick, I'm just going to say this because I'm putting it out to the world. I don't think it's necessarily going to be the choice, but I'd really like to read The Great Divide by Christina Enriquez. I think more likely Anita Damonte Laughs Last will probably be the choice. But maybe it'd be fun, and we'll have both. That would be cool. For romance, I think that This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan is going to be an add-on. I think Expiration Dates by Rebecca Searle is going to be a pick. I'm just not sure if it's going to be the romance pick or the contemporary fiction pick. For thriller, I'm going to pick How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin because I think that has so many reviews. I think that's definitely going to be the choice. For fantasy sci-fi, I think we're going with The Memory Piece by Lisa Coe, but then again, that might be under lit fic. And then I think you're definitely going to get Murder Road by Simone St. James as a horror pick this month. So we'll see. Check back in my TBR for the next month. So my March TBR, I always go over what book of the month picked and what I want to pick, what I'm going to buy. So you'll have a few days till they come out with their picks. February has 29 days this year, which is actually really nice for me because I'm super behind on a lot of stuff. I feel like I got a bonus day, which is really nice. If you're still here, thank you so much for hanging out during this long video. I hope you have a lot of books on your TBR now. Please tell me in the comments if any of these sounded really interesting, if you're like crossing your fingers that book of the month picks one of these, or if there's a book I didn't talk about that you think is going to be the pick. Book of the month at the point I'm filming this has not released any clues yet, and I don't know if they're going to because the app is very much flooded with the book of the year content. So maybe, but I feel like a lot of times I make this video and then the next day a clue comes out. So maybe there'll be a crazy clue that comes out tomorrow and I'll be like, oh yeah, that book. That's the contemporary fiction book. As always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.